Nice setting here this morning.
First of all, I introduce myself, Robin Jennison, Secretary of Wildlife and Parks. This morning, the governor is going to talk about protecting our resources, and as you know, the natural resources is something that touches a variety of agencies, and we have several secretaries here. So I don't forget anybody, I'm going to look around. We've got Dr. Mosier, KDH&E, Jackie McClaskey with Agriculture, Mike King with Transportation, of course, Tracy Streeter, Director of the Water Office, Lana Gordon, Labor. I think that's all the other agencies, and I do want to take a minute to recognize our department. Of course, we deal with natural resources on a daily basis, and Assistant Secretary Linda Craighead, I think, is here. She's back here. And I'll talk a little bit about the river trail before we introduce the governor. She's had a big part in that. Assistant Secretary Todd Workman's back there, and then we've got several of our folks here. I think to start it off this morning, I'd first like to introduce Jackie McClaskey, Secretary of Agriculture. Of course, they have a big role in our natural resource, and let Jackie make a few comments. Jackie?
Thanks, Robin. Well, as Robin mentioned, the Department of Agriculture has been very engaged in the handling of our natural resources and water issues in the state. Under the governor's leadership over the last 3.5 years, we've made a number of significant changes to water law in Kansas, including getting rid of the use it or lose it statute, as well as creating opportunities for folks to make decisions locally and voluntarily in regard to managing and conserving their water resources. Two of the biggest issues there are the creation of local enhanced management areas to be used in the Ogallala region for the purposes of really allowing folks to make local decisions about how to better manage their water resources. In addition, we've adjusted the water banking statute so that it's easier for folks to participate in, and look forward to greater participation in the water banking opportunities in the state. Currently, the Kansas Water Office, led by Tracy Streeter and myself, as well as the Kansas Water Authority, under the governor's direction, are in the development of a 50-year vision for water. We currently have out a preliminary discussion draft that lists over 170 potential action items, all that came from people across the state of Kansas. The governor directed us to get out and talk to folks. We've had nearly 200 meetings and talked to over 10,000 Kansans, asking them for their feedback and their input on what we need to do to make sure we are extending the life of our aquifer, taking care of our reservoirs, and dealing with water resources in every aspect and every area of the state. So that's where our energy has been focused, and we're having lots of great input and traveling the state, really helping people to understand the situation that we need to address, but also working with them to come up with solutions that are market-based, that are voluntary in nature, and keep in mind that we're talking about water rights in Kansas that are indeed property rights. So it's all about looking for a way to balance conservation with economic growth. With that, I'll turn it back over to Robin.
Thank you, Jackie. And before I introduce the governor, I would like to make a few comments. You know, I've been around state government since the mid-'80s, been keenly involved since '90s, and I have never seen a governor that took more time promoting this state and using the office of the governor to focus attention on the important issues. And I've seen Governor Brownback do that with our agency. We've spent a lot of time with him at the various venues that we have, and I've seen it with the Secretary of Agriculture. He's been with Tracy Streeter, all the cabinet agencies, not just ours. But the thing that I've appreciated is the personal interest that the governor has taken with the Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism, and all the things that we do. He would call me up and say, Robin, I'd like to go. One time it was to Wilson, and I said, Governor, I'm sorry, I've got family in town. We're going to see Peter Pan. He said, that's great, family's important, but I told him I'd get somebody, and so Linda Lannerman from the Pratt office took him out to Wilson, and he saw what Wilson was like all of us. It's one of the greatest lakes in the Midwest. It's the clearest lake that you're going to find in the Midwest. The governor is largely responsible for the Kaw River being one of the first 2 national river trails in the United States of America. We focused attention on the Kaw River, which has always been a huge asset for the state of Kansas. As all the municipalities that we have along the Kaw that need that for water, but more importantly, it's a beautiful asset, it's a great recreational asset, and it's focused attention on one of the things that Kansas has to offer that's never been taken advantage of, and that's paddling. That's people to get out on the river, and you get out on the river, and when you're on it, it has a whole different look than what it does when you drive over one of the bridges. And the governor, we had a river canoe trip last year that was about 12 miles. I wished it would have been 2, but the governor finished well before I did, I will tell you. But we've really appreciated the governor's leadership as it relates to the CAW. And as Jackie pointed out, one of the first things that he talked about at one of the first cabinet meetings we had was the reliance, the importance of water on the state of Kansas. And I've appreciated his leadership on that. It's been for 4 years, and I hope it comes for another 4 years. So with that, Governor Brownback, thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Appreciate it. Thanks, Robin. While shortage of water is normally what we struggle with, today we've got plenty. And we've got some flooding in different parts of the state. But therein lies the blessing and the need for Kansas. What we have to do is to secure our reservoirs so that in the future we've got places to store the water so we have adequate water in times of shortage. And that's part of the overall water visioning that we have. In a second Brownback administration, we need to and we will act to secure the water future of Kansas. We've got need areas. We've got them in our reservoirs. We've got them in our aquifers, several of them, but particularly the Ogallala Aquifer. We've got a plan moving forward of a 50-year vision for water, and we will move forward with implementing that. We will push back against the federal government taking over water in the state of Kansas. The EPA should not have control of the water of the state of Kansas, and we will fight against them taking over that control of water of the state of Kansas. That's not their role, that's not their venue, and we're going to continue to push back aggressively, even if that involves greater action even than we've taken to date. We've made good steps in the first administration on water issues. Jackie outlined several of those. We've also made good steps in promoting water, like the canoe trip, the governor's canoe trip we did here. Tim joined us on that. It was a lot of fun. It's very interesting to be able to do, and it's a great asset that we have that's been underutilized. We need to utilize it more and in the future. We will, in the moving forward, implement the 50-year vision for Kansas water being developed by the Kansas Water Office, the Department of Agriculture, Water Management District, local units of government, and our citizens. This is not a one-size-fits-all plan. It emphasizes local control and local efforts. Our state's future water supply will depend on the weather, our river systems, our reservoirs, our aquifers, and our actions today. Our actions today. The reservoirs we have in this state were built, many of them 50 years ago, and thankfully they built them, and they've helped us have a water future. We need to secure that same sort of future vision for water for the people of Kansas that depend on them now for water supply. And we've got a couple of these reservoirs that are 40% silted in. We need to act, and we need to have a good plan, and we're putting that plan and that action in place. And I would just conclude by saying this is a tough topic. Water's difficult. The old Western water law saying is whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And the reason for that is water's a tough topic. We will protect our water supply against other states' intrusion in trying to take our water supply. We've done that aggressively in the past. We will in the future. And we will secure a bright water future for this state. And as a final note, I would note to you that I have credibility to work on this topic that my opponent does not. I've been working on the issue of water since I was in law school. I've written on this topic of water. I've worked with some of the leading water law people in this state of Kansas for many years. This is the time for us to act, and to act you need courageous leadership that has credibility. I have that. My opponent does not. We're going to secure the water future of this state. I love this state. Without water, you don't have a future. We're going to secure that future for the people of the state of Kansas, for our children, for our children's children, and to have a wonderful and abundant water supply for a growing and dynamic Kansas. Thanks for being out this morning. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you being here.
Is there a percentage we can take, or that you'll fight for, or what?
The Missouri River is not, Missouri River, we've had a lot of discussions as governors on the Missouri River Basin. And that is one that continues to be discussed as to the use of the Missouri River water. It's what comes up often in the Missouri River Basin governor's discussion. And I think it's one that we need to have a very robust discussion. My first year in office, the big issue was flooding on the Missouri River. We had basically a controlled flood for 3 months. And that was controlled by the Corps of Engineers because they were the ones that controlled the reservoirs. And there was a discussion at that time, well, what about the water supply itself? Should the states have some of that water allocated to each of us? Not only states, but tribes and various other entities that claim water. And I think that's a discussion we need to be having as a group of states. I've initiated that discussion. It has a lot of interest by a lot of different states and entities. And I think that'll be a long-term discussion, Martin.
Governor, you said your opponent has no credibility on this issue. If you could elaborate on why that is. And second of all, does he need credibility if he's smart enough to say keep somebody like Streeter in place for longer?
Tracy Streeter's great, but if he doesn't have a governor with him that understands the water issues, that can have credibility with it, his influence is diminished substantially. And you go on to some other topic. Why haven't we dealt with the issue of water over the last 20 to 30 years? It's a tough topic. You got to have credibility to be able to deal with this topic. And I do not see that. I have not seen that in any actions that he's taken in the 12 years he's been in the legislature of credibility or interest, really, in dealing with the issue of water, even though its critical nature has been there. And this has been a topic that many have either sidestepped or decided that there were other things to deal with.
So have you proposed funding for the dredging, or is it that the pickup in the legislature won't appropriate it? It's an expensive project.
It is an expensive project, the dredging one. We're going to move forward with that, and I think we're going to be able to find ways that we can work collectively with Corps of Engineers on it. And Tim, the issue here is, again, the thing we've dealt with on NBAF and some others. Federal government's out of money. This is the sort of thing that the federal delegation would get an appropriation for, and you'd get the dredging done. And that doesn't happen now. So we're having to come up with the water resources to do it. I think Tracy's put together some plans on it. Tracy, why don't you step up and you can outline what those are.
Certainly, Governor. This last legislative session, the governor recommended in his budget, and the legislature authorized some funding to start the issuance of bonds, first-year bond payment to dredge a small quantity out of John Redmond Reservoir. Not only does it dredge, but it also has money in it to do protection activities in the watershed to try to prevent sediment from coming into the lake in the first place. So it's a comprehensive project that will look at Redmond, which is our most dire reservoir in terms of trying to meet future water supply needs. And that's why we have to go down there and dredge first, because of its reliance, our reliance of Redmond water supply to keep Wolf Creek Nuclear Power Plant in having adequate water supply during a drought. So we have the plans in place. The governor has helped us in working and getting the permits and moving forward with the Corps of Engineers, and we hope to be dredging next spring. That's the plan right now.
Slightly different dredging question, about sand dredging on the Kansas River, especially around the Lawrence and Dora area. Last I heard, that permit application was in your office. How do you feel generally about sand dredging on the river?
Well, I think the trend has been to see less dredging on the river, and that's been primarily a federal permitting issue. The Corps of Engineers had put conditions on sand dredging because of degradation in the river, and if they monitor the sand levels around the dredging operation, and if there's degradation in that area, they have actually taken some of the permits, and the dredgers have had to go inland to mine that sand. So, but I think it's been largely a federal issue.
And is that not one of the issues that you want to challenge the federal government on?
That's not the issue currently that we're interested with in battling with the federal government. It's been about waters of the U.S., and the Kansas River is not one. It's already a waters of the U.S. So the issue today is more about expanding the regulatory authority of the federal government.
Martin, just a second here. I want to, if I could go back, and I'll take yours, on the dredging question that we had on John Redmond. My understanding, Tim, this is the first in the United States of where a state would be helping or would be paying basically for dredging of an inland reservoir. There's been dredging on the Mississippi River, but we've been working with the Corps of Engineers, and I've talked to the head of the Corps twice about this. This guy that I've known for a number of years. This is an unusual project, but it's probably the way you're going to move forward from now on getting these reservoirs cleaned out. And we are dependent, particularly on John Redmond, for Wolf Creek backup water supply and for 20 communities downstream for a adequate water supply. And if you get in a drought situation, you've got to have more storage sitting in John Redmond, and that's why we've had such an urgency, and also why the federal government has been working with us pretty closely on this, them doing a lot of the planning work, the background work on it, us coming up with the resources to do it, because I think you're going to see this model happen more in this state and across the country as we move forward. Yeah, Martin?
Is our congressional delegation not giving us money for dredging?
Yeah, Martin, you may recall they did away with any sort of congressionally directed funding that happens. So that doesn't happen anymore.
So it's not just whining about the federal government going broke, it's just the procedure's not there.
The procedure is not there, but it's also the federal government's broke. I mean, in the future, we're going to have to step up and do more of these things that we want. In the past, they just built it and paid for it. And in the future, and that's what NBAF, how we got NBAF, was the state stepping up and putting in another $200 million, and we said, oh yes, and by the way, we're not putting that in unless you build it. And they said, well, okay, if you're going to do it that way, we'll put the money in and we'll build it. But if we hadn't aggressively worked as a congressional delegation and as a state and put up additional funds, I don't know that you'd see NBAF being built today. But that's the tactic you're going to have to take and that we're taking. And with that, we're able to move forward. But I think it's a more healthy partnership, frankly. It's not just the states saying, okay, give us. It's the states saying, this is worth something to us, and we're going to put in more resources for it. And the federal partnership, I think, it's strengthening the state end of the partnership as the federal government has less resources.
Governor, but if, for example, the state is going to have to step in and step up and put some money in as a bonding and bond payment to help with this dredging, how does that happen in the context of the projected budget shortfall?
Well, how did it happen with the projected shortfall that we had when we started out? Well, we put the money forward. How did we put forward record amounts of money in K-12? You prioritize things, John, and that's what we've been doing. And we've put in, and we've got a lot more money in the bank now than we had when I started out. I mean, I think what it amounts to, John, is you prioritize things like we've prioritized K-12 in the state of Kansas. And you've seen us put record amounts of funds. And also, John, look at what else we've done in K-12, where we've brought outside resources into K-12 that nobody had before. Our Reading Roadmap initiative is public assistance funds going into K-12. Our JAG program is public assistance. Those resources have never been committed into the K-12 system before, and we're putting them there. Be happy to try to take some questions over the train after it. Well, we can just take them individually. Thanks for being here.
Saved by the train.
How are you?
I didn't time the train for you, Peter.
I'm not the radio anymore. The guys at the Geological Survey have estimated the cost of dredging all of the lakes in Kansas would be roughly the size of the entire all funds budget for the state of Kansas in today's dollars. how aggressive are you going to get with like landowners along those rivers to prevent soil erosion and silting in the first place?
Peter, you're not going to dredge all these. You don't need to dredge all of them. There are a number of them that are in really good shape. But you got some, and that's why John Redmond is so really important, because it's an early one. It's in need. We've got multiple funding sources for it. So you're going to pick and choose, and you're also going to try to build up partnerships, and we'll be going to local communities saying, what's this worth to you? And seeing what we can get out of local supporters for them as well, because that's going to be, you're going to have this sort of
Just got
partnerships.
one question.
I know it's not water, but RPS, just to clarify your position on the RPS.
Yeah, I've supported the wind tax credits federally. I've also supported that they would be phased out over a 4-year time period. That was the last time they came up. That's the biggest issue on wind, is the federal tax credits, because that's really drives the economics on it. I've supported the RPS. If there's a way over time to work that off or to change that, I'm willing to look at that, because any of these are methods and techniques to try to get an industry up and going, and they shouldn't remain forever. So that's what I said on the wind tax credit. That's where I've been on ethanol. You're trying to get these things up and going, and wind has done very well in this state.
So to prevent any future misunderstandings, you would be willing to look at a proposal to phase out the RPS over a certain number of years, 4, 5, 6, if there's a way to do it?
I'm willing to look at that. I want it to be a negotiation with the wind industry and all interested parties. This is what I've been pushing people all along to do, is sit down and talk it through, guys. That's how things happen around here, is you get everybody sitting down in a room and talking about, well, what are you willing to do? And I've supported the RPS initially. I thought it was important to get the industry up and going. The industry is up and going. So, but I want to be clear with you. I'm not calling for this. I'm saying this needs to be a negotiation, and I think it needs to involve all interested parties, including the wind industry, who I've been very supportive of. That industry's doubled in size in this state during the time I've been governor. It has really grown. We've been top 3 the last 2 years in new wind energy. So we've been
Are the utility companies really calling for that? KCP&L's got ads during Royals games where they brag about
they're interested in it. I mean, I think they're just deeply concerned about cost and regulation, which they should be. We want to keep those costs down. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Division, doesn't it? Just what you need to make sure you can pay off what you need.
There he is.
I was listening to the game on your station last night. KCP&L's bragging about it.
What now?
KCP&L's got ads bragging.